Alrighty, great games at your table. I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is Nikos RPG. And we are trying something a little revolutionary here. We're going to be answering questions from viewers for as long as they want to ask questions. I'm going to go through my quick overview as I usually do. And once I've done that, then I'll be glad to answer any questions any player or persona comes up with. If you click on our Discord link, you can actually come on and join me in conversation. We will be limiting that to our Patreon members in the near future, but for now, you can definitely hop on and enjoy the ride as well. And in the meantime, let's get on this, shall we? Alrighty, so what's up with NPCs? There are memes now that show a generic human being-ish figure, and they call him an NPC. There are plenty of comedy videos made about the computer versions of NPCs. But what are NPCs anyway, and what do they have to do with role-playing games? So let's go ahead and start with, I think this is obvious. That's not it. When I get done with you, as my grandfather would say, when I get done with you, you'll never call them NPCs again. Non-player character. If there's a word or a phrase that is desensitizing and dehumanizing, it's non-player character. The very concept of a NPC is that the storyteller, that the game master, doesn't matter. The information that he provides is only a tool for the players, and the NPC is not essential in any way to the game. You can take him or leave him or shoot him in the face with an arrow. It doesn't matter. They're NPCs. They aren't nearly as important as player characters. Well, when I get done here, I believe you'll see that there's some of them that do qualify for that, and you'll probably find this even arguably a better racy word than that for calling them, and that is to call them nudes. And yes, I've got an adult rating on this channel because I don't write material for children any longer. My son is 30 plus years old, 30, almost 40. Let's see, I'm 60 and he was born when I was 23. Yeah, he's coming up on the big 40. Don't want to tell him that. He's a big Marine, a big ex-Marine, so I kick my ass. But we'll talk about the nudes when we get there, and when I get there, you'll be like slapping your head going, duh! Now, spoiler, I did mention this in a previous video, so if you've seen that video, you already know what I'm going to say, and so you're not going to really paying too much attention to that. But this video is actually dedicated to Strigley, one of my subscribers who has been wrestling with non-player characters for a while and had a challenge with creating them, and even went so far as looking at the possibility of using ChatGPT to build them. But trust me, what I'm going to provide you with is going to have your information. You can put your NPCs, never going to call them that again, but your extra characters in perspective in a lot of ways. Now, these are supposed to be color-coded and numbered, but they're color-coded but not necessarily numbered. So we're going to hope that this first one is right. So we'll see. First one we're going to talk about are the VPCs. Yes, he's clearly the villain, the bad guy, or the bad guys, or the bad woman, or bad whatever. The villains are a persona. They are represented by a player in the name of the game master, and they have an agenda. They have feelings, if you will. They have purpose. And so if you don't take the time to actually, hang on a second, check something. Okay, just a second. Ah, there you are. There's Strigley Master. How are you doing, sir? So we're going to start off at the far end of the spectrum and work backwards toward the nudes. I know you and I already talked about them, so you're hot to trot, waiting to see the nudes, I'm sure. But we're talking right now about VPCs. The villains, the VPCs are the focus. Today, many people use a different acronym. They use big BBEG, right? Big bad evil guy, or big bad evil goons, or whatever. They're the big bads. It's like isn't a big bad wolf. The idea of a villain, therefore, is he has to be fleshed out. There has to be some substance to him. Maybe you're going to be, when you're talking about your VPC, he may actually be the most developed of these. Um, Using the collective term one last time, NPCs that you're going to ever build, because you need to know him like the back of your hand. You need to know every freckle, every twist of the flesh to know exactly how to play him to bring him to maximum effect with your players. And villains need the same buildup as the others, and as we go along, I'll explain more about that. But just realize that your VPCs are probably going to be the most well developed because they will be someone that the players have interacted a lot. Now they're going to interact a lot with some others too as well, so we'll get to them. But as I said, this color coordination didn't necessarily work out exactly right. We're going to see, drum roll please, is the next one orange? I mean, is it blue? Because I'm going from purple to blue. All right. So the next one are the RPCs, and these are the ones that the characters will more than likely get to know the very, very best. These are their solace. These are their go-tos. They're the ones that nurse them back to health if the party gets a near fatal TPK. It's the RPC, or recurring player characters, that are going to be their friends. And maybe they're their only friends. You know, in many stories, the vigilante works alone. Maybe only one person knows that they are the vigilante. Well, when you're playing into that trope in a role play game, the same thing is going to be true here. So the RPCs need to be fairly well developed for the minds of the players, because they're going to be someone that lives close to them, someone that knows where their headquarters is, more than likely has some kind of access to get them information. He's generally going to be sympathetic to them if accusations come down through the pipe about other things. But the RPCs, they are almost as important as the villains in terms of development, because they are going to have such a long span with the players. And when I speak about the span, again, the villain's going to sometimes be a show up now and vanish and not come back for a while. Whereas the RPCs are fundamentally recurring player characters that are in the lives of your adventurers week over week, month after month. You know, they're going to be their general store suppliers, or their magic potion sources, or whatever. The idea is that the recurring PC needs to be somebody that's got some handles to it. So therefore, you're going to want to develop the personality in them so that you can see how they would react to what the players do and how they react. So in all of these, I'll be working backwards once we get down to the nudes. I'll come backwards and talk about each one in terms of how they are developed. But I want to get through these so we get them all on the list here. Next one is SPCs. And SPCs are critical. They are absolutely important. In some realms, players would consider them to be MacGuffins. And that is, they are there solely to provide some information to the players. Once they've dispensed their information, they obligatorily walk to the edge of the map and vanish, cease to exist. So SPCs are a little bit like some of the others in terms of their longevity, but just realize that they tend to be critically important to the story development. So an SPC is never just a non-player character. He's got to have some substance that makes him worth hearing. Oh, that's nothing wrong. I knew I'd get to a point where my numbers messed up. Flashing, flashing. There they were. Hide that again. Hide that. Okay, there we go. We got them all out here. And just rest of them come running on the screen. Go ahead. Show up. Except for you. You can go away. There we go. All right. So this is the one we did. Strictly we talked about today, and we didn't have the right letter for. I had to go back and look, and that's the transitional or TPCs, and they're only transitional because they are coming from below this line and becoming relevant. So, for clarification, therefore, we need to talk about the TPCs as being transitional from something to something more important. So we've talked about the VPCs being very important, the RPCs being very nearly as important, the SPCs on an episode by episode basis being important, but the transitional, the TPCs are those characters that the players have dragged from the nothing pile, so to speak, into the something pile. And so they transition from either nudes or CPCs. And I'll go into both of those two other ones, but the point here is that they're the ones that they become important to the story. And that's usually by role play. So the better your group is at role playing, the more characters you're going to be transiting over, bringing into the fold of RPCs and SPCs and VPCs. So now we're going to talk about the two that are really not that important. Now I've already spoiled what nudes are, so you'll see that in a minute. But let's talk about the CPCs first. CPCs are cast-offs. They're characters that are in the story for a reason, but it's not important that they survive. These would be, for example, lower-ranked military personnel, if it's a military campaign, who end up facing their death on the battlefield, and therefore they do the heroics and all of that. Perhaps the CPC is somebody who is running the risk of an enemy gauntlet to bring critical information to the player, so he actually evolves into an SPC for a moment. Or maybe a CPC is just somebody that the players kind of thought was interesting that you only happened to mention by happenstance, and now they really want to know. So realize that the CPCs are cast off in the way you create them. And we'll go into that in a minute. But they are cast off and you don't worry about them anymore. Now we come to the fun ones, the nudes. Nudes are not naked people, although they could be. Nudes are non-essential window dressing, and these fill any credible role-playing environment. If you are describing a bustling city, there are people walking to and fro. Maybe you describe a couple of them, maybe you don't. Maybe you converse about what the players are overhearing from them. Maybe you don't. The idea is that the more you're able to increase the number of non-essential window dressing pieces in the scene, the more chaotic and more dynamic and exciting the scene is. So even in a case where you already have a very clear-cut encounter, having a late-night couple coming back from a tryst and passing through a combat zone, that adds a little bit of interesting flavor and tension to the encounters. So just realize that the non-essential window dressing is not truly non-essential, but it's not important to the story enough for them to have personalities and stuff. But now we get to the final point. All of this, the reason why you need to not call them NPCs is that every person in your story needs to have some form of personality. The easiest way to handle this is description of their clothing, description of their demeanor, description of the way they speak. All of these give away clues to somebody's personality, even if you're never going to encounter them. If you walk into an alley in Los Angeles in the middle of the night in a random street in South Central, you're more than likely you're going to run into one or more of the type of window dressing personalities I'm talking about. It's the guy who just got back from the liquor store and he's happily working on his second bottle on the way home. Maybe it's somebody who's on their way home from work. They just got off the bus and they're trying not to get assaulted or mugged on their way home. Maybe it's somebody, on the other hand, that's looking for a little non-curricular activities to get involved with. The idea is that the window dressing in the area, the more detailed you make it, the more dynamic you make the scene, even with only the descriptions, you're able to create compelling information. So non-essential window dressing is just that. Think with your eyes. Describe what they look like, describe how they move, describe their intention, maybe where they're going, what their demeanor is like. Just describe them physically. You don't have to worry about anything beyond that. If the players are interested, they'll pursue that nude, they'll pursue that non-essential person until they become essential to some other story. In the case of CPCs, you're going to want their description, but you might want their occupation. You may want to know what they're muttering on their way to the bus station, so to speak, if you're doing a modern period. Or maybe they are driving cattle and they seem to be kind of upset over losing a couple head of cattle back down the street. Now they might have just crossed the line from CPC over to SPC. But the idea here is that by giving them an occupation and their description, that's all you really need for most CPCs, because they're going to serve their function and one and done. They're going to vanish again into the scenes. The next thing, the transitionals, this is where the players have shown an interest and you need to draw them over. And this means creativity on your part of the story. Do you create a whole new storyline? Do you expand the one you're already working on? Do you bend it or amplify it? These are all options you have, because the personalities that the players are interested in are the ones that they will interact with, and they're the ones that will get the kind of action and excitement you want out of them. When you make it to the SPC, the story PCs, these need an occupation, they need a description, and they need to have a purpose. Maybe they came to town specifically to carry a message. Maybe they work for the VPC and are just wanting to put the players on notice that they're being watched. Maybe the SPCs are waiting for someone else. There's all kinds of ways you can do this, but you need to know that they're only going to interact with the players for a very short window. And so you want to make sure that it's as compelling and interesting an engagement as possible. So maybe you're going to provide some leaked information about them in previous conversations. Maybe you'll hint at the coming of this messenger. Maybe you've been told, wait until the noon wagon train or whatever. So just realize that the SPCs do have to have some substance. So give them an occupation, give them a description, and then give them a purpose, why they're there. Finally, the last one that I've worked my way down the list and I'm coming back up. RPCs, before we get to the villains, RPCs are by far the most developed NPCs you're going to have in the game. You're going to be holding the RPCs to a higher standard, because these are the ones that the players need to learn to trust. So you have to play trustworthy for them. You need to show examples of the PCs, show the player characters that the RPC is on their side, that they has their back or whatever. So just realize that you're setting them up to be the players' friends, if not their only friends, and you want to make sure that you cultivate that properly so that the players feel the connection. And then finally, the VPCs, you need a name, you need a occupation, you need a description, you're going to need motive, and you're going to need some kind of hooks. And the more crinkly the hooks and the more scary as far as how they could connect they are, the better your VPC is. Now, I've spoken in other videos about this, and for every non-player character, using that term only for a limited time yet, so from the CPCs on up, the CPCs, TPCs, SPCs, RPCs, and VPCs, all those consonants, all of them, you want to have a name, you want an adjective and an adverb or verb. You want the character to be seen or perceived in motion with an emotion. So yes, it's like a song or that emotion. Yeah. Funny, funny, haha. I'm so clever. So the point here is that from the cast-offs upward, you want to give them something that makes them more meaningful. CPCs maybe not so much because you really only need to know what they look like and what they're doing, but may want more. And the others, though, you definitely will want a noun, an adjective, and an adverb. And the reason why you want to use this combination is that you want them to be seen in an action with an emotion. And therefore, by doing that, you create for yourself a framework to build a personality around so that you can play that same NPC session after session confidently. So, as I said, all these have to have a personality, but personality can be all the way down to definitions. Do also remember that less is more. In other words, if I spend a lot of time describing an NPC to a player, the NPC obviously is important to me as a storyteller, and therefore the players are going to treat him perhaps differently than they might if you were more veiled in your approach. So don't feel like you have to oversell the farm, so to speak. You don't have to do that. You simply need to be aware of this personality dip and be prepared to use it, because less will always be more. The final real piece of information to all this is that when you think of an NPC in a game, you have to think of it as a player character, not with the players. It's got to be an NPC so that when you play it, you play them as if they exist, because then they will to the players. And this is important when it comes to the kinds of scum and villainy that comes near the ends of a campaign, and therefore we want to avoid those at all costs. So the point here is that when you play an NPC, even if it's only the window dressing, play up what personality you give them. If it's a dancing girl straight from the party, she's dressed the night. She's excitedly anxious because she's got an appointment afterwards. She's huffing and puffing, maybe a little white around the gills. Obviously agitated and in a big hurry. Poof, she's window dressing. You don't need to do anything more. But if the players decide they want to go check it out, then you find out what she's impatient about. What she's impatient about might lead to more information down the road. So just realize that the play of the NPC, play of the characters you're running into, the playing of the characters that are in the story brings the story to life. And in bringing the story to life, you make it more exciting for your participants. So this is all I had as far as material. Once you understand this concept, you won't ever look at an NPC the same way, and hopefully you'll never call them NPCs again. Instead, they are on the scale, and go to town with that. Alrighty.